Good morning, colleagues. Good evening, maybe for some of you. Um, Welcome to this Geneva Urban Debate on measuring and assessing the quality of life in cities. My name is Antu Long. I am the co-director of the Global Cities Hub. For those who don't know us yet, just 2 words about who we are and what we do. The Global Cities Hub is an organization that pursues 2 objectives. First is to better connect local and regional governments to the UN, to other international organizations, to enhance the influence of local and regional governments in state-led multilateral processes. And the second objective is that we promote the urban work of international actors, encourage them to work with local and regional governments, because as you know, our future is urban. So we're very glad to host this event in collaboration with UN Habitat and the Quality of Life Initiative. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Agatha, for partnering with us. Before we start, a few housekeeping matters. The event is being recorded. It will be made available on our YouTube channel afterwards. Also, it will be held in English only, but you can find on the Zoom some captioning that you can have translated in your own language. So don't hesitate to use them. So today the aim is to introduce the Quality of Life Initiative, how we can help cities and regions understand what constitutes a good quality of life for their communities and how to improve it. And basically also how this initiative, how the Quality of Life Initiative can align with other programs and priorities of local and regional governments, but also of international organizations. This initiative is implemented by UN Habitat, sponsored by Saudi Arabia. It works now with more than 100 cities worldwide. It is a perfect example of multi-level collaboration between the local, national, and also international level. The initiative aims to better understand urban priorities and capabilities as well. They help to equip local, subnational leaders with knowledge, data, tools to enhance quality of life of their people, thereby also, of course, advancing big global agendas such as the Sustainable Development Goals and the New Urban Agenda. So I'm very glad to welcome a number of international stakeholders around this table. We have UN Habitat, UNDP, the Geneva Human Rights Platform, and your contribution, all of you, are super, super important, because whether we speak of sustainable urban development, to human rights, to a healthy environment, all those dimensions are, of course, complementary, mutually reinforcing when we talk about quality of life. So without further ado, let me now invite both Graham and Cawthor for opening remark. The event will be then very skillfully moderated by Pauline Beckers from the Quality of Life Initiative. Graham, you are a public health engineer by profession, and you're leading the UN Habitat Geneva office. You've been one of the main partners of of the Global Cities Hub since the very beginning to advance urban issue here in Geneva. And Cawthor Al-Khudairi, you're the manager of special projects in International Affairs Department, the Quality of Life Center. You've been successfully delivering the Quality of Life Initiative since 2022 in coordination with UN Habitat and various local and international stakeholders. So Graham, please, for your opening remarks, and then followed by Cawthor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antu. Well, we're delighted to be back with our regular partner, the Cities Hub, to embark on one of these Geneva Urban Debates, which of course are designed to look at new and exciting opportunities to debate contentious issues and to bring them to the attention of the community, not just here in Geneva, but worldwide. But this initiative, the Quality of Life, is an incredibly important initiative, because in the UN, we're used to developing frameworks and indicators, but the whole issue about whatever you develop is that, one size doesn't fit all. And it's not possible to design a universal, or it hasn't been possible to design a universal indicator framework which successfully addresses the diversity that we experience across the world, the different continents, and in the different levels of government. And that's why this Quality of Life Initiative is so important, because it looks at those issues locally, and it understands what the local demands are for indicators and how we can use those indicators to monitor change. The great thing, of course, in doing so and making this investigation, the Quality of Life Project offers an opportunity to develop new partnerships at the local level to understand what's going on. And for example, that may be a situation where an academic institution locally works more closely with a local authority to support and engage in their capacity. It also provides an exchange for a forum for exchange of ideas, because the network that's been developed as a result of Quality of Life will enable good practices and ideas to be shared across the world. But perhaps I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but perhaps one of the very important aspects, we're halfway through the Sustainable Development Goals now, and the discussion is already starting about what's going to come next. And we know we've had an experience of implementing the SDGs. We know as a national indicator that it has certain uses, but it doesn't address what's happening at the local level. It doesn't look at the urban inequities, for example. So we hope very much the Quality of Life Programme initiative will support the decision-making process as we move from the SDGs to whatever comes next. But of course, ultimately, giving a tool like the Quality of Life initiative and indexes at the local level will ultimately increase people's quality of life, which is what all of us, both in the UN and other partners, are really aiming to do. So I'm going to stop there. I'm looking forward to the discussion. You know, this is a flagship of UN Habitat. We're extremely grateful to the government of Saudi Arabia for support, and we're always looking for new partners to come and help us implement this initiative. So thank you very much, and to other colleagues here, looking forward to the debate. Thank you very much.
Graham. Father, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you to the esteemed speakers. Thank you to the esteemed guests for your time today. It really is very much my pleasure to be giving these opening remarks, and then of course we're going to leave it to the team to dig further into the details. The Quality of Life Initiative really is a holistic project that's been in development for almost 3 years. So it really has a special place in my heart. I represent, of course, the Quality of Life Center from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The Quality of Life Center is one of the Vision Realization offices. For those of you familiar with Saudi Arabia Vision 2030, the Vision Realization offices were set up to help accelerate and achieve Vision 2030's goals. Now, what we really aim to do here at the center is to put people at the heart of quality of life. We focus on 2 pillars, livability and lifestyle. And we've implemented over 170 initiatives over the course of our lifetime across sectors such as safety, tourism, sports, culture, entertainment, and urban design to really try and benefit the communities that live here and really increase their quality of life. The center was established to lead this effort, and really it looks at daily life from cultural, recreational, as well as security, etc., to really promote that. The initiative itself was brought about because the world right now, as we all know, is changing rapidly, bringing with it both challenges and opportunities. And quality of life is not abstract, right? It's something we feel every day. It's something everyone feels every day, whether it's about feeling safe in your neighborhood, whether it's about how you get to work or school, whether it's about affordability. And the initiative was really established to put these human experiences at the core and center of global agendas and urban developments. Now, Graham touched upon localization and how that adds into achieving specific goals. We really had that at the heart of the initiative and what we were trying to do. I will let the team speak more to the details of the initiative, including the different objectives, subjective measures, the piloting process, etc. But what I really wanted to just hone in on here is we understand and we see through our experiences in implementing our different initiatives the value of putting people at the heart of that change and understanding what they really need and trying to really take their considerations into account and having them at the heart of the decisions we're making. And that's really where the initiative came about, and I'm so happy and proud to be working with UN Habitat as a technical partner. Of course, they are one of the best partners to be working with, and hopefully throughout this journey, we've worked with so many different experts worldwide, over 160 experts. We've piloted in 10 different cities. Hopefully, we've done a bit of a good job in bringing quality of life to the forefront of global agendas and really trying to improve that for people around the world.
Thank you, Kauthar, and thank you so much to all of our opening speakers for a wonderful start to our discussion today. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Pauline Beckers, and I'm an urban health and quality of life consultant here in UN Habitat Geneva. I'm delighted to be moderating today's event, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to be here today. As mentioned by our opening speakers, today we'll be discussing the Quality of Life Initiative and exploring how practical tools and real-world insights can help cities harness people-centered data for inclusive and evidence-based governance. So our event today is broken down into two sessions. In the first session, my colleagues will be introducing the initiative, as well as linking it to other global agendas. And then in the second session, we have a very exciting cross-sectoral panel that will be sharing their perspectives on measuring quality of life in cities, where we're also hope to bring some of your voices in as the audience. Before I introduce and hand the floor to my colleagues, however, I am inviting everyone to join us for a Mentimeter, which is an online poll. So if everyone can take their phones and scan the QR code that we'll be showing on the screen. And I'm asking everyone to answer two quick questions. The first one being, in one word, what does quality of life mean to you? What does quality of life mean to you? And then the second one being, what is needed to improve quality of life in cities? So I'm going to give everyone about a minute to answer that first one, maybe a bit longer depending on how the phones are working. Here, you use this first. So already see some answers popping up. Thank you very much. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So what we see here is we have some of the bigger words, which means they've been answered more often, more of the common answer. And perhaps what we can associate from this is that there are certain more universal perspectives on quality of life. These are things that maybe people from across the globe see as being part of quality of life. But what we also see is these smaller words. I mean, it shows a huge diversity on perspectives on what is quality of life. And since we have a very global audience here today, it's something, this diversity is something that we can appreciate. And I think it gives us a good foundation for our discussion on how the quality of life addresses these very different perspectives on what is quality of life. And if we move on to the next question. What is needed to improve quality of life? Take a minute. A lot of very different answers. Interesting. Thank you, everyone. So what we see here again is there are some bigger words, which are some shared priorities. So I see data, good governance, social cohesion, political will. But again, there's a whole range of different answers on what is needed to improve quality of life in cities. So it's not all about a single fix. It's about the combination of priorities and acknowledging that cities have different solutions to addressing quality of life. Thank you everyone for answering. I think this is a great foundation again for our discussion today. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce my colleagues who will be presenting the initiative. First off, we have Agatha Klause. She is my colleague and senior specialist for partnership and institutional engagement. She leads in the scale-up of the initiative. And then joining us online is Abdul Rahman Mohammed, social inclusion and project management associate. Thank you both for joining us today, and I will hand it over to Ilga.
Thank you very much. So first of all, so many things have already been said, why we need to discuss quality of life, why we need to measure quality of life. So I will spare you the time. I'm not going to repeat what you have already said, but there is indeed a lot of very interesting details about the project that I would like that you take away with you after this event. Next slide, please. So first of all, I will provide you the overview of the initiative, its key pillars. Then Abdurrahman, my dear colleague, will discuss with you how it connects with the global agendas. That is one of the key objectives of this event. Then I will mention to you the index, so the tool we developed to measure quality of life in cities. And then discuss with you how we actually work with cities and with what results. And you will also have opportunity to sign up. So do please sign up to our newsletter information portal as well. So we know the rationale for why we should discuss and focus on measuring quality of life in cities. As such, the key ambition of the project was exactly that, to develop an index to measure quality of life in cities. And we have a great team that over a period of 1.5 years was doing an overview of various indices on quality of life to arrive with very innovative value proposition that I will demonstrate to you in a moment. Then, of course, with any measurement framework, you cannot get away without testing it and rolling it out in cities. We wanted to make sure it is robust, it is relevant, it's applicable, and we did so. And I will tell you about the results of that. Then it's about creating community of like-minded people, experts, colleagues, new and the old ones, to discuss more and better what is the actually role of quality of life in the current agendas and beyond after 2030 through networking events, conferences, and platforms such as this one. So again, thank you, the Global Cities Hub, for enabling this discussion. And last but not least, our ambition is big, is to establish the quality of life as a global standard for measuring, to be measured in cities, and we are working with United Nations Statistical Commission to this end. So Quality of Life Program Center founded this project. The current phase concludes this year, but we are looking into extension planning, which is also an interesting subject for follow-up discussions. Thank you. So in summary, what differentiates us to other initiatives of the similar purpose? First of all, we not only measure the objective phenomena in cities, such as violence. We don't only measure violence by the number of serious incidents per 100,000 inhabitants, but we measure how people perceive safety. We ask people, do you feel safe walking in the city after dark? We bring in the subjective perspective to complement the objective view on the quality of life. And this is a very unique way of measuring it by combining these two. Second, another element of this uniqueness is that we have two layers of the measurement, the global and the local. The global comprising universal features that we think all cities should measure when it comes to quality of life. And the local one is the playground for cities to decide themselves on what they want to measure that is specific to their context, history, what the community needs. And we combine these two in our measurement framework, which is also unique. And then point number 3, we know how important is data disaggregation. You cannot really talk in depth about quality of life in cities without zooming into neighborhoods or how it affects various social groups. Hence, we are also promoting data disaggregation within this project. And last but not least, we deploy AI tools. We deploy innovative ways to measure quality of life within the initiatives, such as we are leveraging mobile ping data that is traditionally owned by private sector to better track the quality of life changes in cities across various dimensions. So that differentiates us from other initiatives. And you have already seen on point number 2 that we measure what is globally relevant and locally applicable. And that's the good moment for my colleague Abdurrahman to comment on how the initiative is embracing the global agendas from our perspective.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Agatha, as well as Pauline. Now, our alignment with the global agendas is quite an interesting discussion as we're aligned with numerous or countless different global agendas. When we think about the SDGs, the initiative supports SDG measuring and localization and acceleration in various ways. The SDGs encompass 17 goals and 169 targets, which approximately half touch on urban growth and developmental aspects, which relate to quality of life. In terms of measurement, the Quality of Life Index sought to address data gaps and complement existing SDG indicators by providing aggregated values localized at the city level. In terms of implementation, the index's multidimensional structure aimed to promote positive synergies across goals and targets. While the initiative more broadly seeks to capture or support local governments in using its results to guide actions that align global goals with what individuals and communities really are concerned about. By leveraging the UMF, or the Urban Monitoring Framework, we provide insights into the city's progress towards achieving selected SDGs or provide a complementary view on cities' performance against selected SDGs by zooming into quality of life in urban areas. We help to identify areas of improvement for data-driven policies and promote the production of timely and disaggregated data. My colleague Agatha will mention in depth the cases of Niche and Udon Thani, where the alignment with the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs was tested for relevant outcomes. Now, to better zoom into the UMF was created to bridge gaps between global SDG indicators and local urban realities. As a result, the Quality of Life Initiative has utilized the UMF as a basic template for the index to align with SDGs and ensure local relevance to improve the ability of local adoption. UMF aspects such as resilience and sustainability are leveraged to capture quality of life aspects. By adopting a UMF and dual layered index, which my colleague Agatha will describe later on, a tool is finally created that is not culturally or regionally restrictive, and benchmarking with other cities is just, fair, and capable. Furthermore, various quality of life indicators are aligned with the UMF, which ensures a unity with global reporting frameworks related to urban sustainable development and enhances further local monitoring capacity while strengthening the evidence-based decision-making for policy at the city level. Next slide, please. When we think about the UN 2.0, it was outlined by the UN Secretary General and our common agenda. And the UN 2.0 calls for the organization to adapt to complex modern challenges with greater agility and foresight. And this is the aspiration the entire UN finds and which we resonate in the Quality of Life Initiative. The Quality of Life Initiative embodies this forward-thinking direction. By harnessing data and digital tools, the initiative delivers impact-driven outcomes and pioneers innovative models of digital service delivery that strengthen resilience in urban planning. Equally, it draws on the social sciences to design policies that truly serve people and communities, ensuring that modernization remains centered on human well-being. Next slide, please. Human rights as a global agenda are conceptualized to be the minimum standards required for individuals to fully realize their quality of life in all aspects of daily living. As such, there is no quality of life without human rights, as they are the daily experiences that ensure adequate living. Human rights principles strongly resonate with the understandings that we have on quality of life. To be specific, human rights and quality of life are both universal, as they are applicable to all individuals, irrespective of circumstances. Quality of life and human rights are both inalienable, as the aspects of daily living cannot be arbitrarily denied unless they are a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim and prescribed by law. So for instance, restricting the freedom of movement during the pandemic to safeguard the right to health. Quality of life domains and different sets of rights, such as economic, social, and other rights, are all interrelated and interdependent, as they are cross-cutting, and an improvement or decline in one area will impact others. So for instance, stronger educational opportunities begetting stronger economic opportunity. Lastly, quality of life and human rights are indivisible, meaning that no right or domain should be prioritized over the other, and all are of equal importance. So for instance, a national government should not sacrifice public health care to create free education. Next slide, please. There exists a challenge in implementing relevant urban rights at the local level due to capacity restraints and different cities having different priorities, as well as urban challenges varying across cities. Since quality of life is a tool that can strongly relate to human rights, particularly urban rights, this allows local governments to prioritize and address local human rights within their city. And I switch the floor once again to my great colleague, Agatha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdurrahman, for this overview. So what you have learned, why we are doing this initiative, what differentiates us from others' initiative, and you know by now how we align with main global agendas, harder to be discussed, of course. Now let's zoom into the index and actually see what the tool is like. So I mentioned two layers, the global and the local. And this is precisely what you have on the slide. The global layer comprising 28+1 indicators that we apply to all cities. All cities measure the global layer. The local layer is the one adjustable. This is where local governments choose their own priorities, their own indicators. This is their playground. This is their story. This is their culture, their history. So by combining these two layers, we get a very unique index. And let me just zoom in into the global layer now. And the global layer covers the following domains, those 9 domains. So if you wake up at night and someone asks you, what do you measure when you measure quality of life? I'm sure you can name all of them. So these are the usual suspects from housing, education, economy. We need good health and infrastructure. We need to feel good and safe in cities. We need to have our social support, we need trust in the institutions, and many, many others. And we need all of these indicators, in our view, to be measured. So those indicators were selected through the consultation with experts over a year time, through expert general meetings on quality of life measurement that was carried out in the period 2023 and 2024. And together with the experts, we decided that those indicators are the ones to be measured at the city level everywhere. And what you can see, interestingly here, is that those indicators are either aligned with SDGs that actually feed back to what my colleague Abdurrahman was saying about this close relationship with quality of life and 2030 agenda, or concrete SDG indicators that actually demonstrate how deep we go in this engagement. For instance, look at intentional homicide rate. It is in a SDG indicator 16.1.1. So it's basically localized SDG indicator as well as other indicators in this framework. Next slide, please. So that's the global layer, and the local layer, the playground I told you about. So we guide cities to deploy a participatory process, as a result of which they collectively decide what they want to measure. We don't want that one person takes the decision. We want a consultation. We want a thorough thinking. And we developed guidelines, 4-step, very simple process. If you follow those 4 steps, Then through participatory process, you will arrive with your conclusions, and you will also know whether you have data on these indicators. And all of that is described in our guidelines on quality of life initiative, which depict like step by step what every city should do when they join initiative. They are lengthy because they provide a lot of details, but if you look at the main structure, it's very clear and provides all the information that you need. So what we did collaboration with cities. We piloted this framework in 10 cities worldwide. If you look at the map, look at the orange dots. From Vancouver in Canada, top left corner, to Logan, Australia, bottom right corner. These are 10 cities. These are our pioneers across various geographical, political, administrative contexts in various UN Habitat regions. We wanted to make sure that this would stand the test of resources, administrative structure, and the test of time. And we got the positive results out of this testing. And that sets the pace for a better and greater effort. Over 100 cities have joined the initiative by now. Over 100. We are talking the Scale Up opened September last year, and we are in September this year. So it's in 1 year. That shows the appetite of cities to measure quality of life. And this is something we are currently servicing, processing. Recently, we launched the global call for cities to join the initiative, and over 70 cities have joined that initiative as well. Happy to have more detailed discussion because we are limited in time today. There is something that should be mentioned is that the results of the analysis are showcased publicly on the global quality of life platform, which has very attractive interface and a lot of very interesting content in it. So just click on it once you get the presentation and deep dive into it. And last but not least, I wanted to circle back into what Abdurrahman was saying about close alignment between the initiative and SDGs. We tested that. Our pilot cities tested that in Nish, in Serdang Udon Thani in Thailand. Both of those cities, next slide please, both of the cities developed quality of life indexes by leveraging voluntary local reviews. So they first collected sustainability data, then they collected additional data on quality of life, and then leveraged participatory process, as a result of which they were able to develop quality of life index as well. So for both cities, we have the quality of life data, the VLR annex on quality of life, which explains how the process looked like, as well as VLR adapted user journey, which is short guidelines. For anyone who has done VLR, they will be able to do quality of life index in an easy manner, and we codified that. Next slide, please. It's a lot of information, so please don't hesitate to contact us. It's just the beginning of this journey. I'm very happy to have colleagues here from the UNDP, of course. One of our pilot cities is over, Scale Up cities over there. A colleague from the Geneva Human Rights Platform. So it's beginning of the discussion. And we're happy to take it forward with you after this meeting as well. So over to you, Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you for my colleagues for introducing the initiative. We'll take a quick break and see if there are any questions here in person or in the chat online. We'll give it a second. No? Andre?
If I may have one, for me, it was very interesting that you mentioned the creative community post-2030 agenda. Could you elaborate a bit more on that? Is it an interactive dialogue, platform, or is it part of your project? How does it read?
So we're very happy to continue discussions with partners, the new and the old ones, about what the project going to be like after this year, because we're finishing a certain phase. And there's a lot of considerations to be taken into account in the light of 2030. So we cannot avoid this. So we are looking into brainstorming about what would be the best for this project to have to potentially fit into various scenarios, or what the 2030 was going to be like. So any thoughts and ideas in this matter would all be very welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else online? No? Well, thank you. We'll now build on what we've just heard and move straight on to our panel discussion, where we can explore some of these themes in greater depth. As I got to mention, we have an excellent panel who I'm delighted to introduce. First off, we have Ronald Jackson, Head of Disaster Risk Reduction and Recovery for Building Resilience at the United Nations Development Program. He leads on UNDP's work on disaster risk reduction, recovery, and mainstreaming risk-informed approaches into UNDP's work. Thank you. Also, a warm welcome to Domenico Zipoli. He is Project Coordinator and Senior Research Fellow at the Geneva Human Rights Platform, where he leads research on strengthening connectivity among international human rights mechanisms and advancing digital solutions for monitoring and implementing human rights and SDGs. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have online Mr. Peter Norris, who is Strategy and Economic Policy Manager at Manchester City Council. Peter is an experienced public sector professional and has dedicated his career to making sure Manchester's residents benefit from the city's growth, working closely with the city's employers and public institutions. We are delighted to have Manchester be part of the initiative, and it's great to have a local voice represented today. We are very pleased to welcome you all today, and after learning a little bit more about the Quality of Life initiative from my colleagues, my first question to you would be, what can be the most valuable contribution of the Quality of Life initiative that aligns with your programs and initiatives? Ronald, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thanks for the invitation to join you for this debate or sharing. But before I really address the question, let me bring a very important quote or ancient wisdom from Aristotle. Men come together in cities for security. They stay together for good life. I think it's quite apt of the initiative that we're here to discuss today. I think it's important for us to recognize that we're becoming a more and more urbanized world. And so it is the theater of risks today and will be in the future. And that's essentially where UNDP joins this particular engagement. We're really trying to ensure that we're addressing these risks such that we can preserve all of the fundamentals that you saw in the Mentimeter around what quality of life means to different actors. Reflecting on the specific question, our programmatic approach to building resilience and sustainability in the urban setting is driven by the 2030 agenda. And so I won't try to repeat a lot of what your colleague presented in terms of how it connects, but for us more particularly SDG 11, and of course the 3 pillars of the new urban agenda. And these underscore for us the need for sustainable cities and communities. On pillar 3 in the new urban agenda, we see it, taking us a little bit further, emphasizing 4 elements constituting UNDP's vision for sustainable urban spaces. So to mitigate and adapt to climate change, reduce disaster risk, protect ecosystems and biodiversity, promote sustainable consumption and production, ensure smart city approaches, and provide basic services and infrastructure, that is access to urban services such as water, sanitation, energy, and transport. Already we're seeing some of the alignment in the elements you've raised. All of these elements comprise what might be construed as quality of life. Yeah? And these connect quite intimately with the SDGs and the new urban agenda. So as resilience building objectives have the potential to contribute quite significantly towards securing the desired quality of life of residents of cities and communities. Our policy and programmatic approach towards urban resilience takes a 3+1 approach. So 3 dimensions of resilience: physical, built structures, environment, and ecosystem services, but more importantly, socioeconomic considerations. With all of these being guided and steered by an agile and forward-looking governance system and structures. Our programmatic footprint is trying to scale up from 25 cities to 25 to 30, and hopefully towards 100. So it was quite interesting to see that you now have roughly 100 people engaging in this particular exercise, and we see some alignment there. In fact, one of the things we can suggest as a measure of your quality of life process could be framed around this concept of resilience. I think some of it is reflected in some of the indicators. Resilience from risk, as well as resilience of the environmental and socioeconomic assets, which have a huge and intimate connection or bearing upon securing sustainable quality of life for human communities. I'll stop there. I mean, there's much more, but I recognize that we have short time and there are other colleagues who may want to come in on this point.
Thank you, Ronald, and thank you for sharing a little bit about UNDP's work, like the 3+1 approach. I think it's very interesting and interesting linkages there. Domenico, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pauline, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to colleagues online. I'd like to start off from the very basics from a human rights perspective. And of course, as Abdulrahman eloquently mentioned just a while ago, quality of life is not an external matter. It is at the very core of the international human rights. So the right to health, housing, education, cultural life, participation, all define what people experience as a good life in their communities. But what is shifting today, and clearly this is part and parcel of what we're discussing here, is how different stakeholders, including cities, can capture that experience and use it systematically in policy making. And as Pauline just mentioned, at the Geneva Human Rights Platform, we have a specific initiative that focuses on the mapping and studying of digital human rights tracking tools and databases. Just a few words of introduction on what these are. These are digital platforms that help governments, institutions, civil society to move from static reporting to dynamic systems of accountability. And we usually distinguish 3 different families of such tools and databases. The first is tracking tools, such as the United Nations National Recommendations Tracking Database, or CIMORE Plus in the Latin American continent. Impact Open Source Software is another software that is used in the Pacific region. And all of these software organize recommendations from regional and UN human rights mechanism, assign responsibilities, and plan follow-up actions. Then there are databases like the Universal Human Rights Index, for instance, in our field is one of the main ones, which consolidates recommendations from UN mechanisms into one searchable repository. And finally, we have measurement projects. An example of a key tool in this context is the Human Rights Measurements Initiative Rights Tracker, which generates independent data on outcomes like health, education, or housing. And you can already see that there's a bit of a link here, right? And my role today would be to try and make a link between already existing human rights tools and databases and the Quality of Life Initiative. Together, these tools are part of what we call the Human Rights Data Revolution. We've published an academy briefing last year with this specific title. I invite you all to download that from our website. And what this revolution does is really moving from static one-off reports that we all know since the beginning of UN human rights mechanisms to living digital systems of accountability that can be searched, compared, and updated in real time. So in this sense, and I'll conclude here for now, the contribution of the Quality of Life Initiative could be to complement this ecosystem by providing the lived experiences of people in cities. This is quite an original methodology, and so not just statistical outputs, but really how people themselves assess their housing, health, inclusion. So I'm talking about that subjective part of your methodology. And if this people-centered evidence is linked to human rights tools that are already existing, my point would be that it would allow local governments to transform quality of life priorities into concrete rights-based commitments. But we can continue this discussion in the next rounds of questions.
Thank you, Domenico, and thank you for highlighting the complementarity of the initiative with other existing tools. I think that's very important. Now on to Peter, who's online. Here's Peter.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the invite. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I thought because I'm responding to this question from a local perspective, I'll start just by really quickly telling you a little bit about Manchester, for those of you who are not familiar with the city. So we talk about Manchester as the original modern city or the original industrial city, but it's now very much a post-industrial city, and like many Western cities in the mid-20th century, the city experienced all the problems associated with deindustrialization, so declining population, falling incomes, declining prosperity, etc. But since about the early to mid-90s, the city has been working very hard to recover from this and to become a successful post-industrial city. And it's done that mainly by focusing on driving economic growth across the city and the city region. And in many respects, that has been a success. The population has recovered. We've grown faster in GDP and in productivity terms than any other UK city, including London, for more than a decade. And if you visit Manchester today, the city looks and feels really different to how it was 10 or even 5 years ago. You know, it's a very vibrant place that's changing very, very quickly. So what does that have to do with the Quality of Life Initiative? Well, we realised in Manchester that we had reached a point where the city had recovered well enough that we can start to think more carefully about how growth happens in the city and who it's for and who benefits. So rather than aiming for growth at any cost, we started to think about how we make economic growth work for people who live and work in Manchester. So there's lots of challenges around that, clearly, but we have lots of strategies and initiatives in place already to help with that. So we have recently launched a new 10-year strategy for Manchester, which is called the Our Manchester Strategy. And that sets the vision for how people experience the city across different themes, such as health, well-being, education, safety, skills, a lot of those things that came up in the word cloud previously. And we have different programs and activities underneath that. So we have an inclusive economic strategy for the city that seeks to make sure that we're harnessing all of those benefits of growth for the city itself. We have plans in place around health inequalities, skills, employment, and so on. And we also operate within the framework established by the wider city region, Greater Manchester, which has similar overarching goals. And within all of that, we kept thinking as a city about how we can start moving towards better measures of success that more accurately reflect how our residents actually experience the changes that are taking place here, which I've described, and move away from some of those more traditional measures. So coming back to the question, whilst we weren't necessarily using the language of quality of life, it is something that we were thinking about a lot, and we knew that we needed information and data that would help inform the decisions that we make about the future development of the city. I think both we in Manchester and also the Quality of Life Initiative methodology take very human-centric approaches to this, and I think for us that's one of the most valuable contributions that the Quality of Life Initiative can make to what we're doing. And that human-centric approach, it aligns really, really well with the programs and initiatives that I've described.
Thank you, Peter. I really like how you highlighted the different ways of understanding growth and success, and that, you know, cities are now searching for a way to measure success that's more relevant to people. And that's a question that the Quality of Life Initiative is hoping to answer. And let's go straight on to the second question, which is, in your view, how does the initiative help a city achieve development objectives at various levels of governance? So at the city level, also at national level, at an international level, and how can the tools like the index and the platform be used in practice for policymaking, planning, monitoring, and community engagement? I'll have Domenico start with this.
Excellent, thank you so much. And indeed, I'd like to do the same as I did before, starting a little bit from the macro perspective. And by being hosted at the Global Cities Hub, it is no surprise to say that cities are already the primary actors in delivering quality of life, I'd say. They manage education, healthcare, public safety services that touch people's lives daily. And these are also the very domains, I've said that already, covered by the SDGs and by core human rights obligations, I would like to stress as well. So the Quality of Life Initiative as I've understood it, and I've studied it prior to this event, of course, helps cities make these linkages visible. I think the visibility aspect is very important. Not only it provides a structured way for local leaders to show what they're doing locally, say, for instance, improving access to affordable housing, for instance, or safer transport, but at the same time contributing to SDG targets. And this is what I'd like also to stress, coming from a human rights background, fulfilling human rights commitments. And our research on local and regional governments, we have a second academy briefing that I'd like to mention today, which is part of our ongoing collaboration with the Global Cities Hub, Localizing Multilateralism, which was published just this year in April, shows that this alignment is often missing. Local data remains a little siloed these days, and national reports fail to capture local innovation. Now, of course, with the Forum of Mayors and all these beautiful initiatives, we see the LRGs are coming into the human rights ecosystem more and more. But indeed, by connecting the quality of life initiative results to human rights tracking platforms, as I discussed just a second ago, cities could demonstrate that their policies are not only improving well-being, but also delivering on international standards. Then the link, of course, between local governments and central governments in different manner is very complex. And but these digital tools could be the bridge, of course. And we already see steps in this direction. Our colleague from Manchester, the city of Manchester, has mentioned quite a great example. The city of York in the UK publishes an annual human rights indicator report as well. Several European human rights cities are piloting standardized monitoring frameworks. Fundamental Rights Agency is working on this issue quite a bit. So yeah, these efforts illustrate how quality of life and human rights agendas can indeed really reinforce each other.
I think you're really speaking to the theme of today's conversation, which is connecting the local and the global and giving local governments a place in these frameworks. So thank you for that. Peter, now on to you.
Sure, thank you. So I've already talked a little bit about Manchester's overall kind of strategic goals, but I think you could summarize them as being about two main things. So firstly, that we need to continue to grow our economy here and become a more prosperous city. And secondly, that we need people in Manchester to directly benefit from and feel the effects of that prosperity. We also need to do that in a way that is equal and inclusive, so that all of Manchester's diverse communities are included in that, and also in a way that is sustainable. So, we take into account the impacts that we have on our own and the world's environment as we do it. And that last point on sustainability is really important for us here. I think I mentioned Manchester was the world's first industrial city, which also means that in some ways we are kind of ground zero for many of the global kind of environmental and sustainability challenges that we have. But I think that all of the challenges and goals that I've described for us here in Manchester are pretty much the same as cities globally, at least at a strategic level. So one of the things that we found really attractive about the Quality of Life initiative is that it can be really flexible to adapt to local needs. And it was, I think we heard a bit about that in the first half of the session, but I think that is a real strong point of the initiative. So while we all experience many of the same challenges, it allows us to focus on more specific objectives for us here in Manchester, such as our inclusive economic growth agenda, or access to green space, or health and well-being, for example. And at a global level too, I think the Quality of Life initiative aligns really well to what cities are trying to achieve. I think in some ways it kind of operationalizes some quite strategic kind of goals and aims in a way that is really practical, which is kind of exactly what we were looking for, I think, as a city. And I guess it could potentially go even further as well. So I've mentioned one of the things that we're really interested in is the differences between how certain groups of people or communities experience what's happening in Manchester. So we can work a bit more on closing those gaps. So for us here, there are quite big differences in things like health outcomes between the north of the city and the south of the city, for example, or between Black residents and white residents. And I'm hopeful that in the future, the Quality of Life initiative could do some work to help us kind of account for those differences that happen on an even more kind of local level as well.
Thank you, Peter. I think you raise a point about disaggregated data and the need to not just look at a whole citywide perspective, but there are differences in how people experience cities, which, you know, to some extent the initiative already addresses. So thank you for that. And now moving on to Ronald.
Yeah, well, at the risk of probably repeating a few things, which is good. I mean, there's alignment. One is this point of global to local. I think it's an extremely important point. This initiative, I think, is fully aligned with UNDP's vision and approach to the 2030 agenda, and more particularly our work on urban risk and resilience building. I mean, we've seen through our own stock take, we did a look at a decade of action, and this was fundamentally one of the big challenges, translating global to national and global, national to local particular actions. There was a dissonance that we felt hampered those efforts to effectively implement a lot of these frameworks and programs at city level. So I think that's the starting point around why this initiative is critically important. I think it's the fundamental backbone to all of the suite of 2030 agenda, and you've heard from our colleagues from UNHCR.
Geneva Human Rights,
Rights.
Geneva Academy.
Yes, right. My apologies. So I think it's important that we recognize that it's an inalienable part of UNDP's urban resilience building approach. We see it as being catalytic in a number of areas. One, data and risk information and resilience diagnostic, which is a fundamental pillar of how we want to lay the platform before we do any other forms of intervention to build resilience. Harmonizing risk and climate adaptation interventions, including the use of nature-based solutions to deliver on our resilience dividends across range of risks, including heat and water and use issues. And of course, it's informing risk-informing urban and sectoral development processes. We see key enablers such as the application of digital technologies, finance, community engagement, more importantly, which is fostered by your local application, and fostering societal leadership through behavioral shifts. And these are fundamentally the backbone to your approach, and I think they're going to be important in moving the global agenda forward. We have some examples in Pristina, in Kosovo, where we've looked at applying some of these scenario tools to helping with the local approaches to addressing the fundamental challenges. We've worked with Urbanist AI to deploy some of these AI-related tools to advance futuristic planning, to increase public participation. So I see, again, fundamental alignment, and I see these as being a very important platform to move things forward. We're working in our Beat the Heat campaign also to look at these issues around heat stress in Nepal, in Sri Lanka. And of course, the whole ethos is to catalyze community action in these particular exercises to ensure that there is ownership to address some of these challenges that face them, such as building green canopies, water spots, tree planting, to build that fundamental ownership to deal with these challenges. So we see that there are some key principles mirrored between the quality of life approaches and what we're trying to do in our urban resilience approach, which is very much linked to these global agenda.
Yeah, so what we see is when we want to address the global agendas, it's not just about bringing local voices to an international level, but giving communities a voice within cities and having programs that do that. Well, thank you to our panelists. I now want to open the floor a little more to the audience as well. We have some interesting participants online and here in person. We have Tom from the World Economic Forum. Do you have any perspectives you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to be here. It's fascinating to hear glimpses into the work that you're doing and those online as well. I guess to kind of sort of complement the discussion we've had here, I bring the perspective of the forum, but also the initiative I lead. And I think, I was just sort of jotting down some kind of real connections. And, at the forum, there are kind of raison d'etre, and the thing that we kind of, it's our main kind of focus is really complementing everything that we've heard here, but bringing, the cross-sectoral and including the private and business sector into the conversation and looking at how you can work in a more effective and collaborative way across civil society and public sector. There's a whole range of initiatives which I will not kind of list here. Look, at the forum you can bring under the quality of life piece, but I'll maybe sort of speak to the one that is kind of closest to what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is in the Centre for Urban Transformation. And actually our kind of often our sort of tagline to talk about this is looking at kind of translating the global to the local. So again, sort of echoing, double echo of that. But the initiative I lead is the Davos Balcatour Alliance, and that's really anchored in really the concept of improving in a holistic way, kind of the holistic quality of our living and built environment. And so, quality, I mean, really, in a way, you could replace, quality of life and that are very interchangeable. And this initiative, what we sort of launched 2 years ago with the Swiss government, who have kind of placed this at the centre of one of their kind of 4 pieces of their Home Affairs agenda, nationally and internationally. And it has now a membership of kind of over 90 organisations, including national governments, but also the business sector as well. What we're really trying to do is equip the leaders of those organisations who are involved, and so you have to have kind of on the steering committee of the alliance as well, so close collaborator there. Equip them to make to make decisions to embed kind of quality in how we shape our living environment. Engagement is there, and we have a kind of 8 kind of principles that we sort of conceptually filter our work, but it's really fascinating to see the discourse between the different sectors. And what we're now trying to do, and it's incredibly kind of well timed, is look at how we can, within this kind of element of quality of life, look at how we've done a lot of kind of identifying good practice today, but actually delving more deeply with our partners, both private and public, on these kind of projects and programs that have had good quality outcomes in terms of places, whether it's engagement or governance, looking at what kind of facilitated that in order to kind of equip leaders, particularly those who are kind of decision makers of finance, business kind of case on all sectors, to embed those a kind of more holistic approach to quality, coming away from, particularly in the built environment, race to the bottom, or kind of indicators that are purely technical and not bring in the idea of sort of sense of place. Culture is a big theme that we bring in. And it's amazing to see organizations, particularly private sector, who may, example, kind of huge international kind of construction firms or real estate organizations getting behind with ministries of urban development, and now we're sort of next month launching a work with our own kind of small cohort of cities to pioneer place-based work around these kind of concepts, but also moving towards a kind of data or kind of both data but also evidence-led approach to how we actually measure quality. This word Balcatour is building culture, and so how do you improve the way that you shape places? And so it's really fascinating to hear how they're kind of fusing and disaggregating kind of the local data there, and something I'll definitely be taking away with, and hopefully we'll continue our collaboration with those already around the table and others.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting the importance of the public and the private partnerships, and also looking at what's already been done and what lessons we can take from that. And yeah, anyone online, I see there's some questions. I'm aware of the time, we're already over time, but if we can take 1 or 2 questions or comments from online before we move into our closing comments. I see one. I can just read out the one that I see online here. Any feedback loop in terms of reporting back on how the member cities fare on the quality of life indicators under the presented monitoring framework? I think that's something that I got. Any feedback loop in terms of reporting back on how the member cities fare on quality of life indicators under the presented monitoring framework?
Absolutely. So as a part of the process, our cities produce data, and this data is displayed on the quality of life platform. We are now looking into automatically generating reports that allow to summarize and synthesize the data in a neat manner. So that is one way of reporting back to cities. And of course, we're looking into product extension and possibly extending the pipeline of the initiative, reaching beyond this initial assessment, connecting data with policy and practice. And this is something we'll be especially looking into in the coming years.
Thank you, Gata. Well, since we don't have any more questions, oh, we do have another question.
I
Sorry.
because I noticed that we have really a great panel in the sense that we have different stakeholders around the table in the discussion. And I wonder if you could elaborate from your point of view, whether you see this multi-stakeholder cooperation more feasible at the local level, at the national level, at the global level. Where do you see the biggest potential to link these different partners, like the initiative, like international organizations, human rights frameworks, or even the private sector, as Mr. mentioned? What do you see as the biggest potential?
Yeah, if I can just very quickly.
Okay.
Thanks. Instead of distinguishing between local, regional, and international, I think the crucial area of action here would be the digital. I might have said it already, but there are a number of entities, both national governments, international organizations, local governments now with the initiative, that are collecting data, that are using data for policy making, and also, of course, for promoting what we call human rights, but we can also call them, of course, the sustainable development goals. But this is a space that transcends the international, the local and international. So I think that cooperations between digital tracking and database and human rights measurement initiatives, so the developers of these tools, I think, would be a good conduit for collaboration. So really looking at the different levels, but truly from a digital perspective.
From where I sit, I see all levels as support. One of the fundamental challenges we're facing is global policy alignment, for recognizing that there is quite a bit that's happening at the global level that's forced down to the national level in the form of programs. We need to harmonize that sort of global policy harmonization and financial harmonization. And then I see at national level docking and alignment with national policy setting. There's some work that needs to happen there. And it really is about how we shift gears, leadership of a process at global level. When we get into the national level, the leadership should change, facilitate that national docking policy alignment. And then, at the local level where it all happens, so it's then a different shift. It's how do you then ensure that all of the policy framing and alignment, financing, is effectively applied at local level. I don't see any one. I think this kind of grouping of different actors, we need to share a sort of common frame that brings us together to harmonize, whether it is on technology, data, platform, but we're having the same intelligence around what are the specific needs, how do we shift from data to policy, but then what does that translate to on the critical and fundamental. I hope that.
Yeah, and if I can answer just very briefly, I think for us, I'm very well. Firstly, I think the methodology is very good at driving collaboration locally. You need a lot of input from local stakeholders, and we're lucky here in Manchester that we have very good partnerships around the city. But I also hope that it will drive, or the insights that result from the information that we collect will drive kind of further collaboration and further conversations locally about what those results and kind of insight mean for the city. So that's quite exciting to look forward to when we've got it all together. But I think for us, we are an international city, we're a very outward-looking city. And I think another really interesting opportunity that the methodology and the initiative could create is opportunities for kind of direct collaboration between cities that are facing very similar challenges and similar kind of problems or issues, but also which are kind of well matched to tackle those together as well. It's something that we kind of try to do anyway through other networks, but I think having more chance to do that would be really good. And actually, we've already made a couple of good connections through the project anyway.
I think it's very rewarding through the initiative to see, you know, through our webinars and events, how the city engagement works, and also through the platform with insights. I think that is part of the initiative that's very rewarding. And on that note, I would like to transition to the final part of the session, which is closing reflections. We have some closing reflections from Andres, Senior Policy Advisor at the Global Cities Hub, and Robert, Senior Advisor, Land, Housing, and Human Rights at UN Habitat. Andres, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And first of all, let me repeat what Ant said at the beginning. We are really happy to have this event at the Global Cities Hub, to have all you around the table and all the audience online. There are a lot of takeaways. I will not cover, of course, all, but let me emphasize perhaps 3 points that was very interesting for me. One, answering my last question, is that multi-level cooperation needs to really happen at every level, so vertically and horizontally. And as you mentioned, Ron, alignment and coordination is very, very important. We are happy to have this discussion between the local, the national, and the global level as part of the initiative. And I also took note of what Peter mentioned, that it's not only a vertical conversation, but it's also a network of cities who can share their experiences peer-to-peer. Because our experience is that often the peer-to-peer conversation can yield better or quicker results. The other point I took note was that the initiative really aims to have applicable tools, but applicable in the sense that everyone can shape it in their own way. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, which is very important because often the global standards are difficult to apply at the local level. And it's not only a measurement, but an expression I took for myself is that it also offers the possibility of improvement in the future. And Peter, you mentioned that your thinking is changing from recovery to looking forward in the future. Economic prosperity also means that the people-centered approach, an inclusive, sustainable approach. So I think it's also a very important value of this initiative to offer this tool to improve for cities. And third, I will very much like the idea to use the data, create this index, to use the index to have localizing SDGs and preparing the VLRs, but also to launch this conversation on the future of post-2030 agenda, where I believe local governments will have a bigger say than they had in 2015. And on that note, let me conclude with the remark. Domenico mentioned the Forum of Mayors, which will happen here in Geneva in 2 weeks' time, which is also a platform where cities, where mayors can exchange their views. And I'm very much hopeful that we can work on synergies and perhaps cooperation between the Forum of Mayors as a platform and the Quality of Life Initiative, because the aim is the same: to give voice to the mayors and help them to work on SDGs, on VLRs, on quality of life. So these are my key takeaways. And once again, thank you for the cooperation. We are always happy to work with UN Habitat and organize this Geneva Urban Debates.
Right, how do I follow that? I apologise in advance that I don't think my thoughts will be quite as organised as Andreas's. I've tried to organise them a bit, but I don't think I've got quite as succinct as you have. First, I was thinking in a lot of discussion about this relationship with human rights. I mean, clearly any concept of quality of life comes from that same origin of the point about human dignity and the essential nature of that, and the original concept of the four freedoms and where human rights frameworks were built up from. So you've got a similar origin there. But I don't think it's the same. I think the point was made that human rights provide a baseline element and quality of life takes you beyond that. I definitely agree with that. And I think that fits with the old Hammarskjöld point that, you know, some of the essential function of the UN is about saving us from hell rather than taking us to heaven. And I think, you know, it's not quite that extreme, obviously, but there's a bit of that distinction here that we're looking at something more than quality of life. And I think that means, for me, instinctually, I think human rights comes out as having a stronger objective core, and quality of life has a stronger subjective character around that. It combines things. So I think there is a definite difference there that needs to be borne in mind, and that you're not trying to do the same thing. And so the way in which obligations work and things like that wouldn't be the same. And then that also made me think, when looking at some of the categories in the data, there's a very strong, I was struggling a bit to get the right word, emotional or qualitative character to a lot of what you're talking about. You could actually have a situation where data doesn't change, but your results in your indicator framework could change quite significantly on something. So it has a much more political character to it in some ways, which is not easy to manage. So that's something you need to keep an eye on going forward, and that I think would be very important for cities to keep an eye on. Because, you know, it's sometimes like that old analogy of riding a tiger. It's when you're on top and in control, but at some point it might eat you. I'm not saying it will here, but it's a much more live animal that some may be aware of. And that made me also quite intrigued to see with time, you've got some indicators and areas that are more kind of outcome focused and some that are more process. And I'm ways, I can see I've even killed the technology. It always leaves me as quite intrigued as to how those will balance out, how they will interact. Will shifts in process they immediately into outcomes in the outcomes. So how that works over time, I think, would be important to keep an eye on. And that then sort of takes me into the thing of thinking from the point of view of the cities, to be aware, and everybody, I guess, it isn't just about data and results. The way in which you do the local layer of what you're doing is also going to be about defining character and identity. What a city says, well, I want to do it like this, and I want to emphasize that. That is a statement by that city about this is how we want to be seen and what we want to be in the world. And that's quite another dimension as well, which is extremely important. Which then gets me into, I'm nearly getting to the end, I promise. It sort of starts to get me into what I think is the trickier bit of managing this over time. You have to have some kind of coordination and moderation always. I don't see how this could become a completely sort of organic and free-flowing type of network, because somebody needs to hang on to some consistency, because that kind of political dimension, character identity, is about marketing yourself, and it's about attracting people and investment and things like that. And that means there needs to be, maybe softly, but some level of arbitration throughout, as long as this keeps going. That then also, of course, makes me interested to look over time at longer term policy responses, both at the local and national level. As this evolves, how do governments and how do private sector actors and others react to this? How do they use it, interact with it, bounce off it, build on it? And then that was the last one. My last point was to think,
it's very much a process that requires time. You can't do this for 12 months and say, well, the project's finished and we're not going to do it. This is something that happens over time. And I suspect it will also have an innately iterative quality to it. There will be, as somebody was asked about feedback loops. I think that's innate to the whole idea of it. I don't think you could avoid that even if you tried. So that iteration of, you might not call them phases or whatever, but I think it will evolve like that. Okay, we did this, it produced that, we got there. You like that, we don't like that, well, let's have another go. And I think that kind of circularity will evolve over time. But it will be important to start thinking now, how does this evolve over time? How does it become a sustainable process? When it's wonderful that Saudi has helped you get it off the ground, but when they or other donors, we know recently how the winds can change when that money isn't there anymore. How does it keep going, and how do you keep that core content? Because I think you need the basic structure for people to look at this and say it's comparable and it's useful and trustworthy. But very interesting, and lots of things that I find in my list of saying, I want to see what happens with this, I want to see what happens with that. So I look forward to following. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for the longer term perspective there, and from Andres as well. So I know we're eating into everyone's lunch period right now, at least for those in the Geneva time. So if you're interested in engaging with the initiative, we are putting up a QR code here. And if you're a city or an institution that wants to engage with us in any way, please do reach out in the chat. And we also have shared the emails. Please do engage with us. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you to the speakers, to the panelists, and to the audience as well for staying with us till the end. And this concludes today's session. So thank you very much.